Hi, I'm Pastor Kori, the Associate Minister here at Orange.
And I'm Adam Seed. I'm the lead pastor here at Orange.
We're so excited that you joined us today. We are talking about a wonderful topic, one that is really important here at Orange and in the wider scheme of our church, but that is children's ministry. And we have two very, very special guests who are going to be talking about faith formation and children and how we can bring up those disciples from a very, very young age and how important faith formation is, even beginning at the beginning of life. And so we have Alissa, who is a graduate of Duke Divinity School, received a Master of Theological Studies there. She worked as the children's director for 6 years at St. Matthew's Episcopal in Hillsborough, North Carolina. After serving there for that period, she moved with her husband, Brendan, and their 3 kids to Waco, Texas, as Brendan is a professor. And now she began, while being there, a ministry entitled The Little Way Chapel, which is an online resource for families who want to faithfully and intentionally live out their Christian walk. And so we're really excited to have her here, and I know she's going to have a lot to share.
We're also joined today by someone very special to all of us here at Orange, Diana Backus. Diana is in a unique situation that she actually is serving at the same church that she was baptized in. And she serves us here at Orange so faithfully as the director of our preschool program and also the director of children's ministries. So we're so thankful to have Diana share her wisdom and experience with us today with regards to her love for children.
Thank you.
And just to begin, we have a question. What is the importance and goal of faith formation in children?
Well, I would say the goal is Diana, to be honest. I would say it goes all the way back to baptism. I mean, in our traditions, we baptize children, and they don't have a choice in that. And at their baptism, a new reality is made for them where they are brought into the kingdom of God. They are brought into the family of God, into the church. But they don't get to make those promises, and they don't get to make those vows on their own. Instead, the parents and the godparents, they make those vows on their behalf. And so I see the importance of children's ministry and formation, and the goal of it is just an extension of that baptism to help children live into the reality that was claimed for them at their baptism. And it's really the responsibility of the parents, the godparents, and the entire church who witnesses those vows to make sure that that formation happens for children. So I would see that as the goal.
I would agree with that. I always loved the fact that I was baptized as a baby, because to me, it showed the faith of my parents and my grandparents and the people around me. So even though it was not my choice, it was a very powerful modeling of the faith of my family. And so I think that as children and as we're growing, we take on whatever beliefs our parents take on whatever beliefs our parents have at a very young age. And we don't begin to make our own decisions until later in our youth. Is when we really might start questioning our parents' faith or what they believe or what they are doing. So I see it as a very strong just faithfulness from my parents that they baptized me as a baby.
Yeah. And I would say too, I mean, if we think of baptism as planting a seed, it's about watering that seed and watching it grow, and watching it blossom into a full-fledged faith that they can confirm later on.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I love that. I remember when I went before the Board of Ordained Ministry to go forth for my provisional status, and the son of the man who baptized me when I was only 2 weeks old, but the son of the man who baptized me was on the board, and I ran into him, and his dad is in his 80s now, and I just said, would you let Bill know that a baby he baptized remembered her baptism? And, that was a really amazing moment to me to say that I did remember, and I made that choice for myself, and I'm grateful that I did have that community of witnesses who formed that faith within me so that I could make that choice and I could experience the Holy Spirit for myself.
Yeah, and I love that image also of the seed, because I think about that this spring I planted some seeds of flowers, and every day I go out to make sure I water them and to make sure they're growing and popping up, and the joy that I have when I get to see it starting to pop up, and I take pictures and I have to go and tell my wife, oh, my baby seeds are coming out, and it's because I'm just contributing to that which is already being done. And because seeds have been planted. And if we present a child for baptism, but then we don't do anything, is it ever going to grow? I think it is so vital that we continue to water it, to tend to it, to help that seed become a full grown flower. And as two of you have demonstrated through your work so much, opportunities and ways of reaching individual families and children. What are some of those times maybe that you've seen it that maybe a child just begins to get it? What are some of those approaches that you find that work well when you have seen that they got it and you're like, oh, that's what it takes?
Well, for me, I feel like raising children in the church is about teaching them to follow Jesus at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is teaching them to follow Jesus. And what children really need, every child needs stability, they need structure in their life, and they need patterns. They're going to search for it. They get it from school. And if we don't give that to them, they're going to create their own rhythms and patterns, and they might not be healthy ones. So for me, it's part of the church's job to provide healthy patterns and rhythms for children. And thankfully, the church provides the liturgical calendar for us to do that. It's a tangible way for us to actually follow Jesus through the church year. So we start with him in his gestation during Advent, and we walk with him through his birth at Christmas and his childhood during Epiphany, all the way up to his resurrection. And we follow that cycle every single year. And for me, it's a perfect pattern for children because they need that rhythm and that stability. We all do. So the approaches that I look for are approaches that really follow the church year pretty closely, and teach children how to follow Jesus through the church year. Not only because children need those rhythms and patterns, but because it makes it easy for us as parents too, to bring that home, and to help them live those things at home as well. We all celebrate Christmas and Easter at home, in our homes as well. And that is more than half of Christian formation, is really what happens at the home.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, the healthy patterns are definitely what we need to enforce. It's helpful if the parents are on board with that and are helping model that at home, because it's hard when you only have 1 hour a week to really influence a child. And so you have to make those efforts to reach out to children through the week or through other means, just to connect with them and let them have the opportunity to ask questions or just talk to you about the things they might not understand. parts of Jesus's life that they don't understand, or why can't they see him? Or so there's a lot of just witness for this, for forming children's spirituality, because it's all something they cannot see. Fortunately, with children, their imaginations are very vivid. And so it is the time to introduce them to Jesus and to our scriptures, and to let them know that he's with them always, because they can follow that better as a young child than as an adult. It's easier to comprehend it almost as a child, because they imagine way more exciting things in their life and through the world, and see things through the world than we do as adults. So.
Diana, I'm glad you mentioned children's imagination, because I just think that is so crucial in children's ministry, to harness that. And some of the approaches that I've seen that have worked really well are really good at harnessing a child's imagination and kind of that innate spirituality that they have. Two of those approaches are kind of Montessori type approaches, so very hands-on experiential learning. The curriculums are called Godly Play and Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And I'm sure there are tons of curriculums that kind of harness that hands-on experiential learning. But what I really like about these approaches is that they model what we do over in the big church. Like, if the goal is to plant a seed, then the seed that we plant needs to be the right seed, right? Mm-hmm. And what we're watering needs to be, like, we don't want to be watering the wrong thing. So if we want to teach the children how to grow up and be formed as faithful disciples, what we do now really matters. And so what I like about these approaches is that they modeled the liturgy of the church. The children come in and they listen to a story based on Jesus's life, and they're not the question. Then they're given open-ended questions. So they're taught to wonder. They're taught to pray along with God and to wrestle with God rather than just search for the right answers, which I think can just be so, it's just what we all want. We all want the right answer. We want to give the right answer. And I really like approaches that don't focus on just coming up with the right answer, that teach us to wrestle with God. So really, for me, anything that is experiential and hands-on and encourage the imagination, like you said, Diane, and help children explore really who is God and not just be told who God is.
I think it's so interesting about the patterns and the imagination, because I have a 2-year-old, so now I'm reliving children's ministry through him and getting to see how he sees the world and how he understands it, and the patterns that he creates, or that he's already making. He assumes everyone who leaves their driveway in our neighborhood is going to church, because that's the only place we really go, especially right now. But also we're like driving down the road, and we live in the South, so there's churches everywhere and crosses everywhere. And he said, "Oh, look, Mom, the cross." And we talk about, like, what is the cross for? That's for Jesus. And he told my father-in-law, who's also a pastor, Larry, said, "You know, Ephraim, Jesus is in your heart." And he said, "No, he's not. He lives at church." So that those patterns, I just see them so clearly in him. So we're working on the hard part.
It'll come.
And Kori, Pastor Kori, I remember you telling about on Ash Wednesday, you had gone down to the preschool to offer ashes for the parents as they drop their kids off. And I remember you sharing about a conversation as you were talking to some of the kids about Jesus, and you said how I think one of the preschool students just began to lay out their theology just perfectly.
Yeah, and Diana, you can speak to that even a little bit. We have a few, and I think the beauty of that was, Diana, you said that he knew all of that because it's so important in their home.
Yes.
He told me about Jesus being tempted in the wilderness and how this is, that's what Lent is. And I was just amazed. And it was because it's so it's such a central part of their life at home. Well, can you share, we just shared a few, but can you think of moments in your life? I know you're both moms, but you're also both pastors, in your own lives and ministry, of seeds that were planted that you actually got to witness bear fruit.
Well, one of those examples is a youth at the church that I previously worked at. She's now graduated college, but she was baptized in the church, similar to Diana, and came up in it. And even though the ministry was small, even though it had been through 7 different children's ministers by the time I got there, that it didn't matter because the congregation had so loved her and supported her and formed her. It was her home. And to the point where, I mean, the church she was so involved in extracurriculars, had a lot of friends, but the church was the most important thing to her. And when she graduated and went off to college, sure enough, she found a church at college, which is what we all want. That is the goal of children's and youth ministry, is that when we send them out of the doors of the church, that it's not the last time that they walk through those doors. And so for me, it's a small example, but it's just the perfect example of what we want to see happen. That the children that we baptize grow up in the faith, consider the church their family, and then come back to it afterwards.
Yes. I think I've been here all my life, so it makes it hard to remember years that I've actually been employed as the children's director, but I've seen so many children come up through our program and families, and those children then go through the youth program and have gone away to college and so many have come back. They come back to visit, or, I've seen a few of our youth who have gone on and gone into the ministry themselves. And I've seen a couple who have moved back to the area and they are back in church and they're in the praise band. So that's a fulfilling part of being here, and only seeing these kids on a very limited schedule, not like being in school 5 days a week, but being here once a week, or maybe sometimes 2 or 3 times, but seeing them stick and most times it's the church family. Because of the church family, everybody is part of their family, not just their parents, but the rest of the congregation really takes an interest and takes it to heart and helps raise these children. And but it's a great feeling when they come back as adults, or when you see them. I love to watch the youth and see how they have transformed from being children to youth. And then when they graduation Sunday is a huge Sunday even for me, because I'm so excited to see the kids. I know these kids from some of them when they were born. So it's just a great experience. I'm very fortunate to be able to watch that and watch their faith develop.
And going off of what you said about the church being their family, there was a Barna study that came out a few years ago that polled young adults in their 20s, asking them that grew up in the church, and asking them whether they stayed in the church or not after high school. What were the reasons? And the single most important reason listed for why young adults stayed in the church was a significant relationship with another adult in the church that wasn't their parent, and wasn't their pastor. And I think that just speaks to the significance that this is a family, and we all witness these baptismal vows, and it's all of our responsibility. to make sure that these children grow up in the faith, and to not just hope that that's happening from afar, but to really roll up our sleeves and get involved in their lives.
Yeah, I really give thanks that I have been able to serve some churches that spoke that life into the lives of my two sons, who are now 22 and 20. And, of course, when they lived at home, they were going to be going to church because Dad was the pastor. But it wasn't just up to my wife and I to help raise them in the faith. They took those baptismal vows. Each church took those seriously so that they might be able to help them develop that understanding of who they were in God's creation. And this past Sunday, and as we were worshiping online, I looked on my phone as Pastor Kori was preaching, looked on to see who all was watching is what I was doing, I promise. But I looked on my phone and I saw that my oldest son says that he was watching worship with us. And it just warmed my heart that on a Sunday morning, there was a beautiful day that he could have gone hiking or done something. He found it important to still connect and worship God. And I was thankful it made me think back to all those churches that helped to raise him and to help him understand who he is in the midst of God's creation. So that was just something that I gave thanks for, as I'm on the other side of that 2-year-old part, Kori. So what about, what could you share for us that parents or teachers might be, or even caretakers within the church or outside of the church should know about children and faith formation? Are there certain resources we could share with them that you have found to be helpful?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Some of the resources that I have found to be most helpful in my own ministry are buildfaith.org and worshipingwithchildren.org. And what I like about these two websites is that they follow the liturgical calendar. So they follow the church year. You can look it up by what the lectionary texts are that Sunday. And they just have some really good creative ideas. And part of the work that I'm doing now is creating an online community that provides the resources that I developed when I was working in children's and youth ministry. And that's at the littlewaychapel.com. And so those are probably the 3 resources that I utilize the most right now for children's ministry.
I have followed you on the Little Way Chapel. So I appreciate that you have that resource out there for people to pull up. I also love the Jesus Calling devotional book. I mean, I like to pull things out of that for the kids, just to bring those things up when they have questions, or just so they have something to read each day and maybe have questions with their parents and they can talk through it. You don't have to, as a parent, you don't have to know the answers. You just have to have the conversations, and it's okay to say you don't know, and you discover it together. And that's part of the excitement of going through faith with your child and your family, is you discover it together. You don't have to know the math answers. This is more fun to go through spiritual answers than go through math for me. I'm not a math person. And I just read the Spiritual Conversations with Children, and I love this book. It gives you great ideas on how to have those conversations with your kids and how to start those conversations. Mainly just letting them do the talking. Sit down and play a game with them, and then let the conversation flow naturally, because it's easy. It's going to be easier to have those discussions when they bring up the topic than if you ask them an outright question. A lot of times they'll say, I don't know, I'm fine. But if you let it flow naturally, you will get a whole lot more information from your children on what they're feeling or what they're seeing, or when they see God. You can ask them, when did they see God at work today or this week? And just let it go from there. they probably see him more than you realize. So just let those conversations flow naturally.
Diane, I love that advice, and it reminds me of some of the best advice I have ever gotten from a seasoned parent. And that was, when you are in the car, our temptation is just to turn on the radio or turn on music, but to not do that. Because the car seems to be the place that children feel free to ask the most spontaneous questions that they might not feel comfortable asking when you're face to face around the dinner table. And I think it's that because you're not looking at them, you're looking at the road. And if you just create space for your children to ask those questions, and then see where it goes. So I love the advice that you gave, Diane. Appreciate that.
And I actually, Alissa, I had sent Diana that book because it was on the Little Way Chapel. You'd recommended it at some point. And so I look forward to stealing Diana's copy when she's finished for myself as a parent. And, you know, as I've tried to, I think back about my childhood and the way that my parents and the church shaped me, and think about how what I envision or my hope for Ephraim is in terms of faith formation. And I think something that's really hit home for me lately is the simple act of just praying for him and praying with him. So, and there's a great, I think, Alissa, it may have come across on your account when liturgies for parents that I've been using, and I've been sharing. I lead a parenting Sunday school class, and we've been using that and sharing it with one another and trying to be a support during this time. But it's amazing. At 2, he knows the doxology and Jesus loves me, and he knows how we start to pray and how we finish because of the patterns. Like we said earlier, we do it. And the other thing I was going to say is I love how hands-on and how much fun you make the liturgical year. And in the Episcopal Church, y'all utilize saints as models of who to look to, so that we do see examples of ourselves following Jesus, of people, ordinary people seeking to live a life that is modeled by Jesus, and how we can celebrate them and have fun. I mean, I just think of all the feast days and the fun and the cakes and the reenacting and how it brings it to life. So those are some fun things I've seen through y'all and appreciate.
Well, this has been great today. I'm so thankful for the opportunity for us to be able to connect and to just talk about this, because it is such an important thing, whether it is people that have children that are still at home, grandparents, or even other people that are part of the church. We all have the opportunity to impact the lives of children. And so, Pastor Kori, do you have any final questions that you might like to offer?
Just the final one I'd ask is, you know, in this unique time where we are not together, we're not there to hug and hold and to remind these kids that we love them, and they're not as tech savvy. I mean, some of them are, but a lot of them don't have access to it. What are ways that we can continue to form that faith, or what ways have you seen that have been helpful or meaningful?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. It's interesting because suddenly we all are finding ourselves to be our children's ministers and teachers. And I really think that the best thing that we can do is realize that we have been all along and that we will be long after this is gone. And I say that not to put pressure on parents, but to empower them to realize that you have the gift, you have the power in your child's life to bring them Jesus. And some really practical ways, now that we're all like searching for new routines, and we talked about how important patterns are in children's lives, some really practical ways is just start the morning, develop a morning and evening prayer routine. Like you just said, Kori, your 2-year-old knows the doxology. That doesn't just happen, right? It happens through routines. And so it doesn't have to be a complicated routine, but a short morning and evening prayer routine is a really easy way to make sure that your children are getting the spiritual nourishment. And then, Kori, you also mentioned kind of the way that in my home we celebrate the liturgical year. That includes we celebrate saints' days, but it also includes just walking through the church year with your children. Right now we're in the time of Easter, so let's celebrate. Start every morning by saying, Alleluia, the Lord is risen. And let your children shout, the Lord is risen indeed, Alleluia. And don't forget that it's still Easter, and encourage your children to remember and live into that resurrection faith that we have. So those are just two small ways that we can, in this time, continue to nurture and develop our children's faith. I don't think that, obviously, this pandemic is not a blessing, but it has given us, it has opened the door to many gifts. And one of those gifts is time with our children and the ability to develop routines and patterns that we can continue on after this is all over.
Certainly, I agree with that. They're just small ways to bring faith into your family routine every single day through prayer, through morning prayers or evening prayers, or prayers at dinner time and all of your meals, to be thankful for your meals. There's definitely, and to celebrate, like you said, it is still Easter. Celebrate Easter. It wasn't one day, it's a season. And all of our liturgical seasons that through the year, I mean, celebrate all of them. Definitely, we, just like you would celebrate any other, the 4th of July or any other holiday, bring those celebrations home as well, and in making cakes, or it through food and eating, or through crafts or celebrations, or making whatever you can come up with to do at home, making prayer rocks and using those even in your own home for ideas for prayers. And today I'm going to pray for, and it can be certain people, certain things. You can create prayer boxes where kids can actually write down a prayer request and put it in a box. And then maybe at dinner you can pull a prayer request out of the box and pray for it. Just those simple little things that you can do around your house, and to model for your kids what your faith is, because it means a lot. I mean, they like to imitate moms and dads, seriously. So good or bad, they like to imitate you. So it's important that you model in a way that you want them to grow.
All that is such great information for us, and I'm so thankful once again that the two of you chose to be a part of this with us today. And so we are so thankful for the way you've contributed to this Table Talks, and we give thanks for everybody that's watching this today, and we invite you to share it with friends that maybe have children or grandchildren or others just in the church that might be able to learn how to be able to continue to help shape the faith of our children. So thank you all for being a part of this today, and I hope you have a great day.